At my wedding, my mom smiled and said, "We're passing the car his parents gave you." Everyone laughed, except me, because that car was proof of something I was never supposed to know. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. The church smelled like flowers and perfume. My white dress felt heavy, but my heart was light. I was marrying Dean Foster, the man I thought I'd spend forever with. Our families filled the pews, smiling, clapping, snapping pictures. Everything looked perfect, too perfect maybe. When my mom, Lydia, handed me the bouquet and kissed my cheek, she leaned close and whispered, "We're passing the car his parents gave you." Her tone was light, but her eyes looked strange. The words didn't land right. A few guests chuckled, thinking it was some kind of inside joke. I smiled back, pretending to understand, but my stomach tightened. The car. It was a silver Audi, sleek, spotless, too expensive for someone like me. Dean had surprised me with it 2 years earlier, back when we'd only been dating a few months. He said, "My parents wanted to do something nice for you. They're already crazy about you." I'd been touched then. It felt like a big sign of trust, a gift from his family. But something about it had always felt off. When I tried to thank his mom, Vivian, she looked uncomfortable and said, "Oh dear, don't mention it." I thought maybe she just didn't like me much. But standing there at my wedding, my mom's comment replayed in my head, twisting tighter each time. Why would she say it like that? Why we're passing the car? It didn't make sense. After the ceremony, everyone was laughing, drinking, dancing. Dean looked perfect, his smile wide, his hand always finding my waist. He kept whispering, "You're mine now, Mara," like it was a sweet promise. But each time he said it, my chest felt heavier. I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was just nervous, overthinking like I always did. Yet, when my mom hugged me before leaving that night, she whispered, "We'll talk soon." Her eyes were soft, almost sorry. The drive to our hotel was quiet. Dean hummed along to the radio, but my thoughts were far away. On that car, on my mom's voice, on the strange look Vivian had given me that day years ago. I remembered how Dean had pushed for me to sell my old car right after he gave me the Audi. He said, "You don't need to. This one's better." I'd agreed, grateful, proud even. Now it felt different, like something had been traded behind my back. Dean reached for my hand at a red light and smiled. "You okay?" he asked. I smiled back. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." But inside, something small and sharp was waking up. A question that wouldn't let me rest. That night, after Dean fell asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window. The car was parked below, its silver paint catching the streetlight. It was beautiful, too beautiful. And suddenly I hated it. Because deep down, I knew my mom's words weren't a mistake. They were the beginning of the truth. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I first saw the car. Dean had driven up to my apartment with a wide grin, waving his hand like he couldn't wait another second. Parked behind him was a silver Audi, shining like new. He tossed me the keys. "It's yours," he said. I froze, thinking he was joking. We'd only been dating for a few months back then, still figuring each other out. "Dean, that's not funny," I said, half laughing, half unsure. He stepped closer, all charm and confidence. "My parents just upgraded theirs. They said you should have this one. They already love you, Mara. Think of it as a welcome to the family." It sounded sweet, generous, even romantic. I tried to protest, saying it was too much, but he shook his head and pulled me into a hug. "You deserve it," he whispered. The keys felt heavy in my hand. I told myself not to overthink it. Dean came from money. His family owned several car dealerships across the state. To them, this probably wasn't a big deal. Still, something inside me didn't settle. When I first drove it, I remember checking the glove compartment and finding nothing. No registration papers, no insurance card, not even a dealer pamphlet. Dean said he'd take care of all that later, so I let it go. Months passed. The car became part of my daily life. I drove it to work, to dinner dates, to weekend trips with Dean. My coworkers teased me about moving up in the world. I smiled and nodded, pretending I wasn't still wondering why his parents would be so generous to someone they barely knew. Then, one afternoon at Dean's parents' house, I finally got the chance to thank them. Vivian was arranging flowers in the kitchen when I mentioned it. "The Audi you gave me, it's such a beautiful car. Thank you again." She froze. The scissors in her hand stopped midair. For a second, she looked at me like she didn't understand. Then she forced a small laugh. "Oh, that," she said quickly. "It was Dean's idea." Her tone was strange, flat, careful. She changed the subject right after, asking about my job, my mother, anything but the car. That tiny moment never left me. At the time, I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just awkward about gifts. But now, standing here as a married woman, I couldn't stop replaying that look in her eyes, the quick flicker of surprise, like she'd been caught in a lie she didn't prepare for. Back then, I didn't push for answers. Dean had been perfect, kind, attentive, always knowing what to say to calm me down. But my mother's words at the wedding had cracked something open inside me. If the car truly came from his parents, why had Vivian acted like she didn't know about it? And if it didn't come from them, where did it really come from? The thought wouldn't leave me. The car wasn't just a gift anymore. It was a question I couldn't ignore. The honeymoon glow faded faster than I expected. Dean came home from work each night distracted, glued to his phone, fingers flying across the screen. When I asked who he was talking to, he'd smile too quickly and say, "Just business." At first, I let it go. I didn't want to start our marriage with suspicion. But the small things started to pile up. He'd leave early for meetings that didn't show up on his calendar. He stopped talking about his parents altogether. And whenever I mentioned them, even casually, he'd stiffen. One evening, while we were having dinner, I said, "We should invite your parents over sometime." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Why?" I frowned. "Because we just got married? It'd be nice." He dropped the fork, leaned back in his chair, and sighed. "Mara, you read too much into everything. Can we just eat?" The tone was sharp, sharper than it should have been for such a harmless question. I said nothing, but inside, the silence grew heavier. Later that week, I overheard him on the phone in the next room. His voice was low, hurried. "No, she doesn't know, just handle it," he said. When he noticed me standing by the door, he snapped his phone shut and smiled. "Hey, you need something?" I nodded toward the phone. "Who were you talking to?" "Work stuff. You wouldn't understand." He kissed my forehead, brushed past me, and went into the shower. I stood there, staring at the closed bathroom door, my chest tight. Something was definitely wrong, but I didn't have proof, just instincts. The next morning, I called my mom. Her voice was soft, tired. "Hi, sweetheart. How's married life?" "Fine," I lied. "You've been quiet since the wedding. Everything okay?" A pause. "Everything's fine, Mara. I've just been busy." She didn't sound busy. She sounded cautious, like someone choosing each word carefully. I wanted to ask her about the car again, but she changed the subject before I could. We talked about recipes and weather, nothing that mattered. When I hung up, I realized she was avoiding it on purpose. That night, I lay beside Dean while he scrolled on his phone. His screen lit his face, but the light caught something cold in his eyes. I turned away and stared at the ceiling. The next day, while he was at work, I opened my laptop and started looking through old emails, insurance documents, car payments, anything connected to the Audi. Some files were missing. Others had been renamed. It felt like someone had tried to clean up a mess. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, only that I needed to know the truth. I remembered the day he gave me that car and the strange silence that followed every time I brought it up. Now, years later, it was still haunting me. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped pretending it didn't matter. The next Saturday, I drove the Audi to the only person I could think of who might know its history, Gabe Larson, the mechanic who used to service it. We'd gone to high school together, though we hadn't talked much since. His shop sat on the edge of town, the same old brick building with grease stains on the sidewalk and a faded sign that read Larson Auto Repair. When I pulled in, Gabe looked up from under a hood and squinted, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well, if it isn't Mara Ellison. Haven't seen you since junior year." "Hey, Gabe," I said, forcing a smile. "Mind giving this car a quick check? It's been acting weird lately." He nodded, gesturing for me to pull into the bay. As he popped the hood, I glanced around the shop, same old smell of oil and coffee, the radio humming low in the background. My nerves buzzed beneath my calm voice. "You've worked on this car before, right?" "Yeah," he said, leaning over the engine. "Recognized it as soon as you pulled in. You still got it running smooth. Can't say the same for most cars this old." I laughed softly. "Guess I take care of it." "Out of curiosity, do you remember who owned it before me?" "Dean said his parents gave it to us, but I never really knew the detail." Gabe hesitated. His head stayed down, hands busy with the tools, but his silence stretched too long. Finally, he said, "You're asking who the first owner was?" "Yeah," I said. "Just wondering." He stepped back, wiped his hands again, and looked at me carefully. "Mara, why do you want to know?" My heart picked up. "Just curious. You know me. I like things to make sense." He sighed, walked over to a filing cabinet, and flipped through a few folders. Pulling out one, he looked at the papers inside, then at me. "You sure you want to know?" The question made my stomach twist. "Yes." He handed me the folder without another word. I read the top line, expecting to see Foster somewhere on it, but it wasn't there. The registered owner was Lydia Ellison. My breath caught. This can't be right. "That's my mom." Gabe nodded slowly. "That's what I thought when I saw your name on the service log." The title was transferred to Dean Foster about 2 weeks before he brought it in for a tune-up. I didn't think much of it then. I stared at the paper, the words blurring. "So it didn't come from his parents?" "No," he said quietly. "It came from yours." I set the folder down, my hands shaking. "Can you print me a copy?" He hesitated again, then nodded. Just be careful, Mar. People don't hide stuff like this for no reason. Driving home, the road blurred through tears I didn't mean to cry. Every memory I'd built around that car, the surprise, the gratitude, the pride, felt hollow now. My mother had given it to Dean, and he'd lied. And I couldn't tell if she knew what he'd done, or if they'd both been part of it. I drove straight to my mother's house, the folder from Gabe's shop still on the passenger seat. The sun was setting, turning the living room windows gold when I pulled into her driveway. I didn't knock. I walked right in. She was sitting at the kitchen table, reading glasses low on her nose, sorting through bills. When she looked up and saw my face, her expression shifted. First surprise, then worry. Mara, honey, what's wrong? I dropped the papers on the table. You tell me. She reached for them slowly. When her eyes landed on the registration form, her hands trembled. She didn't even try to speak at first. It was registered in your name, Mom, I said, my voice shaking. The car Dean said came from his parents. You owned it before he gave it to me. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I waited. The silence stretched between us, thick and painful. Finally, she exhaled and whispered, I was hoping you'd never find out. My throat tightened. Find out what? That you gave him the car? Or that you've been lying to me too? Her eyes filled with tears. It's not what you think. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Then what is it? She pulled off her glasses and rubbed her temples. Dean came to me 2 years ago. He said he wanted to surprise you, make you feel special. He told me he didn't have the money yet, but would pay me back soon. He said it was for you, for love. I could barely breathe. You loaned him money? She nodded. It wasn't just money. It was part of the trust fund your father left you. I thought, she stopped, her voice breaking. I thought he was doing something good for you. He said you two were serious, that this would make you happy. He promised he'd return every cent. My hands went cold. You gave him my inheritance? Tears slid down her cheeks. He swore it would be temporary. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to ruin what you had. I thought he meant well. But when months passed and he stopped returning my calls about the repayment, I realized what he'd done. I stared at her, the air thick with disbelief. So the car wasn't a gift from his parents. It was mine. He used my own father's money to buy something and pretend it came from him. She nodded weakly. I'm so sorry, Mara. I didn't know how to tell you. When I said that at the wedding, I didn't mean to let it slip. It just came out. I pressed my palms against the table, trying to stay upright. Every memory of Dean flashed through my mind, his confidence, his generosity, his perfect timing. None of it had been real. He hadn't been showing love. He'd been building a lie piece by piece, using my own money to make me fall for him. I backed away from the table, shaking my head. He stole from me, Mom. From Dad. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing softly. I know. And I hate myself for helping him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock. Then I whispered, he's been living off me since the beginning. And in that moment, everything about my marriage made sense. The defensiveness, the secrets, the strange calm he carried after every argument. He wasn't just a liar. He was a thief who had built our love out of my loss. I couldn't look at him the same after leaving my mother's house. Every smile, every word he'd ever said replayed in my mind, twisted and false. When Dean got home that night, humming like nothing had changed, I watched him walk across the living room and wondered how long he'd been lying to me. He kissed my cheek, tossed his jacket on the couch, and said, You okay? You look pale. I'm fine, I said quietly. Just tired. But my eyes followed him, his easy stride, the phone he kept face down on the counter, the way he hummed when he wanted to avoid conversation. Something inside me hardened. I needed to know everything he'd hidden. The next morning, after he left for work, I started searching. I checked drawers, files, and the desk he never let me use. Inside the bottom cabinet, under a stack of insurance envelopes, I found a thin pile of papers bound with a rubber band. Loan agreements. I sat on the floor reading them, my hands shaking. He'd borrowed money from at least 3 private lenders over the past 2 years. The signatures were his, but the address listed on the forms was our home, my name next to his on one of them. My credit. My security. Then I found the receipts, hotel stays, late-night charges from casinos 2 towns over. I remembered his business trips, the ones that always came with vague explanations and no pictures. He'd told me he was networking. I should have known he was gambling. I kept digging, pulling open the drawer of his nightstand. A small black phone buzzed faintly when I picked it up, one I'd never seen before. There were messages on the screen from someone saved as Riley. Miss you already. You said she won't find out. Next weekend, same place? I read every line, my stomach twisting until I felt sick. He hadn't just lied about money. He'd lied about love. Every dinner he'd cooked, every weekend trip, every promise he'd made. All of it was paid for with my father's inheritance and my mother's guilt. When I walked through the house, I saw the evidence everywhere. The furniture he insisted we upgrade. The ring he said he saved for. The honeymoon he called a deal too good to pass. I could almost hear his voice again, calm, charming, rehearsed. By evening, I was sitting in the living room, surrounded by the papers spread across the coffee table. When Dean came in, he glanced at them and froze. "What's all this?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. His smile faltered. He picked up one of the loan letters, scanning it quickly before setting it back down. "Where did you find these?" "They were right here," I said softly. "You didn't even hide them well." He rubbed the back of his neck, muttering something about temporary setbacks and plans to pay it off. I didn't say a word. That night, after he went to bed, I found the final piece, a letter from my mother tucked into his desk drawer. Her handwriting. "Please don't tell Mara. She's been through enough. Take what you need, but make it right." My chest ached as I read it. Even my mother had tried to keep peace by feeding his lies. He'd taken from everyone who loved me, and none of them had realized they were building his world out of my father's memory. Our marriage wasn't a home. It was a house built on debts, secrets, and someone else's money. The next morning, I woke up knowing what I had to do. There was no point in yelling, no point in tears. He'd built his life on pretending, and the only way to end it was to make him face every lie in front of the people he'd fooled. I called his mother first. My voice didn't shake. "Vivian, I'd love to have you and Mr. Foster over for dinner tonight," I said. "Just us and Dean. I have something important to talk about." There was a pause. "Of course, dear," she said. "Everything all right?" "Everything's about to be," I replied. All day, I moved quietly through the house, setting the table, lighting candles, arranging the stack of papers I'd collected. The car documents, the loans, the letters, the screenshots from the hidden phone, all neatly lined up in a folder beside Dean's chair. It almost looked like a normal dinner, except for what was waiting at the center. When the doorbell rang, Dean was pouring wine. He smiled when he saw his parents. "This is a nice surprise," he said, glancing at me. "You didn't tell me you invited them." "I wanted it to be a family evening," I said, taking my seat. We made it halfway through dinner before I opened the folder. "I think it's time we talked about the truth," I said quietly. Dean's father looked up. "What's this about?" Dean laughed under his breath. "Mara, not now. Let's not make a scene." I slid the first page across the table, the car title. "This belonged to my mother before you changed it," I said. "The car you claimed your parents gave me." Vivian's fork clattered against her plate. "What are you talking about?" I passed her the paper. Her eyes widened. "Dean, why is Lydia's name on this?" He swallowed, still smiling but thinner now. "That's old paperwork. It's not what it looks like." I laid the next stack down, loan contracts, gambling debts, messages from Riley. His mother went pale. His father's jaw tightened. Dean reached for my hand. "Mara, listen. Everything I did for us. I wanted to give you the life you deserved." I pulled my hand away. "Love doesn't steal," I said. He tried to speak again, but his father's voice cut through the room. "Is all this true?" Dean didn't answer. His silence told enough. Vivian's eyes filled with tears as she looked at. "I had no idea," she whispered. "I know," I said softly. "Neither did I." Dean stood, desperate now. "I made mistakes, but you can't just throw away everything we have." I met his gaze. "What we have never belonged to us. It belonged to everyone you used to lie to me." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the slow ticking of the clock. Then his father pushed his chair back. "Get out," he said, his voice low and final. "You've embarrassed this family enough." Dean's mouth opened, but no words came. He looked at me like he expected me to stop his father, but I didn't move. I just watched him gather his jacket, eyes wide, breath uneven. When the door shut behind him, the room stayed silent. Vivian whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mara." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I didn't cry, didn't break. I just sat there, the documents still spread across the table, the candles burning low. For the first time in a long while, I felt nothing, and that nothing felt like peace. After that night, the house felt hollow, like a stage after the final act. Dean's scent lingered on his side of the bed, his shoes still by the door, his watch on the dresser. I didn't touch any of it. I wanted him erased, not remembered. The next morning, I went to the bank. The manager, a kind woman named Teresa, recognized me right away. "Mrs. Foster," she greeted. "Just Ellison," I corrected. "And I need to make some changes." I closed our joint accounts, every one of them. The clerk didn't ask questions. She just slid the forms across the desk, and I signed them without hesitation. The balance numbers on the screen didn't feel real. They were pieces of me he'd turned into lies. I moved everything back into my own name, reclaiming what he thought he'd buried under charm. Next came the trust fund. My father's lawyer met me in his small office downtown. When I told him what had happened, he pressed his lips together and nodded. "Your father set it up so no one could take it without your consent. If Dean used it, he forged your authorization." He slid a document toward me to resecure the account. I signed, sealing it back under my name alone. A strange calm filled me, quiet, sharp, almost electric. Back home, I walked outside and stared at the silver Audi parked in the driveway. The metal gleamed under the morning sun, beautiful but poisoned. I called a local dealer and arranged to sell it. When the buyer arrived, I didn't hesitate. Watching the car drive away felt like cutting off the last thread of a lie that had choked me for years. With the money from the sale, I made one last stop, an office that still carried my father's name on the door, the Ellison Scholarship Fund. I'd avoided the place for years, but stepping inside now felt right. I handed the director a check and said, "Use this for someone who needs a start. From my dad." She smiled softly. He'd be proud. I walked out lighter. Days passed, and I heard things. Small-town whispers travel fast, even when no one speaks them aloud. Dean's company had let him go after a client discovered discrepancies in his expense reports. The story spread from one neighbor to another, quiet and relentless. People didn't need details, they knew enough. Vivian called once, her voice trembling. "He's been staying in a motel outside town," she said. "He's angry, but mostly he's lost." I didn't ask where. I didn't care. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the living room, the one we used to share. The air was still, almost peaceful. The documents, the lies, the car, all of it was gone. What remained was mine again. My father's legacy, my home, my name. I didn't need revenge that screamed. The quiet kind was better. The kind that left him surrounded by the ruins of his own choices. He had stolen my trust. I had taken back my freedom. It had been 6 quiet months. The air in the house finally felt like mine. No lies hiding in the corners. No fake laughter echoing in the hallway. I'd started sleeping through the night again, cooking for one, reading at the table where his chair used to be. Life wasn't happy yet, but it was peaceful, and that was enough. Then one evening, a knock broke the calm. 3 short raps, hesitant but familiar. I froze, the sound pulling me backward through time. When I opened the door, he was there. Dean stood on the porch, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead. His suit was wrinkled, his face thinner, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who'd lost everything and didn't know where else to go. "Mara," he said softly, water dripping from his sleeves. "Please, just let me talk." I didn't move. "You shouldn't be here." "I know, but I had to see you. I've changed. I swear it." His voice cracked a little. "I'm not that person anymore. I messed up, and I hate myself for it. I've been getting help. I stopped gambling. I'm working again, just small jobs, but I'm clean." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled photo, our wedding picture. "I still carry this," he said. "I just want a chance to make things right." The rain fell harder, bouncing off the porch rail. I looked at the man in front of me, the same charm, the same pleading eyes, but there was nothing left to feel. No anger, no longing, no sympathy. Just distance. "You want a second chance?" I asked quietly. He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Yes. Please, Mara. I know you don't trust me, but I'll prove it this time. I can be the man you thought I was." I turned, walked into the living room, and came back holding a small white envelope. His eyes followed it like it was his last hope. I held it out. "Here." He frowned, taking it carefully. "What's this?" "Open it." He tore the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the copy of the forged title transfer. His signature stared back at him, neat and practiced, next to my mother's name. Beneath it, a short note in my handwriting. "Now you know how it feels to lose something that wasn't yours." His mouth opened, but no words came out. The rain hit harder, drumming against the porch roof. "Mara, I shook my head. "You didn't lose me because of what you did. You lost me because you meant every bit of it." He stepped forward, desperate. "Please, just hear me out." But I was already closing the door. The latch clicked softly, cutting off his voice, his smell, his presence. I stood there for a moment, hand on the doorknob, listening to the sound of rain against wood and his fading footsteps. Through the window, I saw him pause at the edge of the empty driveway, staring at the spot where the Audi once sat. The car was gone. So was the life he built on lies. I turned off the porch light and walked away. The ocean was the first thing I heard every morning, a soft rhythm against the shore, steady and forgiving. My new home sat at the edge of a small coastal town where no one knew my name or my past. The cottage was small, painted blue with peeling shutters, but it was mine. Every bill, every dent, every choice mine. I'd traded polished floors and expensive furniture for wooden steps that creaked and a porch that smelled of salt. I didn't miss the old house. I didn't miss the silence that used to hang between me and Dean. The quiet here was different. It didn't hide secrets. It let me breathe. Most mornings, I drove down to the harbor in my truck, a dusty old thing with faded paint and a stubborn engine. It coughed when it started, but the sound made me smile. I'd bought it secondhand from a fisherman named Carl, who'd laughed when I told him I didn't need anything fancy. "Good," he said. This one's honest. The first time I gripped the steering wheel, I realized it was the only vehicle I'd ever owned that wasn't tied to a lie. No hidden money, no forged papers, no false generosity. Just metal, rust, and my name on the title. My days fell into a rhythm. I worked part-time at a small bookstore near the docks, stocked shelves, and spent afternoons walking the beach with a cup of coffee. Some evenings, I cooked simple meals, fish, rice, vegetables, and ate by the window, watching the waves catch the last light of day. The stillness didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. When my mom came to visit, she brought a bag of groceries and a box of my old things. We sat outside on the porch, drinking lemonade while gulls called in the distance. She looked at me and smiled, the lines around her eyes softer than I remembered. "You look peaceful here," she said. "I am," I told her. It feels like I finally caught up to myself. We didn't talk about Dean much, but sometimes the subject drifted near. That afternoon, she laughed suddenly and said, "Remember what I said at your wedding? About the car?" I smiled, shaking my head. How could I forget? That one line changed everything. Her laughter faded into a sigh. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought keeping quiet would protect you." "I know," I said. "If you hadn't said it, I might still be living that lie." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the water. It felt like forgiveness didn't need words. It was already there between us, gentle and steady like the tide. Later that night, after she left, I unpacked the box she'd brought. Inside, under a few old books and a photo frame, I found my wedding picture. I held it for a long moment, tracing the edges of the image. Then I placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, not out of sorrow, but as a marker. The day I stopped mistaking manipulation for love deserved to be remembered, not erased. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the sound of the waves against the rocks. I looked out at the small truck parked by the dunes, its headlights dim under the fading sun. It wasn't much, but it was mine, like everything else in my new life. For the first time, the road ahead felt open. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from Dean and starting over, or should I have given him another chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.